This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I am your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Dr. Rebecca Homkes, who is an economist and a high-growth strategy specialist who advises CEOs and executive teams focused on growth and success through uncertainty. Uncertainty isn't new, and we've pretty much normalized it at this point, but what's different now is that the stacking of uncertainty. We have tariffs, AI, disruption, shifting policy signals, and constant organizational change are all hitting leaders at once. The result isn't just uncertainty, it's chaos, and chaos has a cost. Dr. helps leaders understand why uncertainty is inevitable, but chaos is optional, and how the best leaders can build clarity, momentum, and growth, even when the external environment is unpredictable and ever-changing. She is a lecturer at London Business School and Duke Corporate Executive Education, and the director of Young Presidents Organization, YPO, Global Active Learning Program. She's also the author of Survive, Reset, Thrive, and a frequent contributor to Bloomberg and CNBC. So, Dr. Rebecca, welcome aboard, and glad to have you on today.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve.
So let's start with a little context. Just kind of tell us kind of where you grew up, some early influences you had, and kind of how you landed to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually grew up in the Midwest, so born in Michigan and then Indiana. So go Hoosiers and go Wolverines if you're a sports fan. It's been a pretty good year for us Midwesterners.
Yeah,
And
for
then
sure.
I moved to London and did my master's and PhD at the London School of Economics. And while there, kind of fell into a career of kind of working at a business school while advising CEOs and really getting obsessed with what it takes to lead performance, especially in very uncertain environments. So I've moved officially back to the US, but I still split my time between Europe and the US. I teach at two business schools, but I spend most of my time working directly with CEOs and teams who are trying to grapple with uncertainty and not just manage through it, but actually lead a high growth journey through it.
So, and in your bio, it talks about you
Yeah.
live between Miami, San
Yeah.
Francisco, and London. So, how do you do that? You got like three different homes, or what? How
I
does that
do.
work?
Yes, I lived in London for a long time. I did my PhD there, kind of started my career there, but I always knew I wanted to move back to the US. So South Florida is kind of my home, but I split between there and San Francisco. So kind of jump back and forth between the two coasts. And it's a good mix, between being very immersed in the tech scene, but not there all the time, and getting some good dose of Florida sun as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, for those that are watching this on video, I'm holding
Yeah.
up your book now. Here, it's a Survive, Reset, and Thrive,
Mhm.
and it's a very comprehensive book. It was, I can tell you put a lot of time and effort into
Yeah.
that, and I'm sure there's a lot, a
Yeah.
lot story behind writing that book.
Yes, I have heard it's not a weekend read. I do know that from people who have read it. It's meant to be a playbook that will last with you for a long time.
For sure. So you talk about periods of uncertainty,
Yeah.
and and that's a great time to grow. So
Hmm.
a lot of times people would look at uncertainty as
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. But you say,
Hmm.
if you have a little different mindset, it's a great time to
Yes.
explain that a little.
The reframe is really powerful. Is that something that I noticed about uncertainty, Steve, is that we tend to frame it as if it's bad. And it's not our fault. Our brains are just kind of formed evolutionary times to see things that we can't predict or we can't understand and see them as bad. And I really noticed it in how leaders spoke to each other about uncertainty, is that we would ask each other questions like, how are you handling uncertainty? Or how are you dealing with uncertainty? Or how are you managing uncertainty? And if you look for it, when leaders are discussing uncertainty, they're almost always putting a word before it. And that means it's going to be bad. And we're framing our brains that this thing is negative. And I found that if you just reframe uncertainty for what it is, it's only a series of future events which may or may not occur, right? And whether or not those events are good or bad depends on what you're trying to do and how you're set up. And that's your job as a leader. Figure out what you want to do and then get set up to succeed in that world. And that reframe's quite powerful because when you see a lot of uncertainty and volatility around us, as we are right now, your instant reaction is to frame it as bad and go into risk protection mode. Whereas really, this is opening up one of the greatest environments of growth.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, we talk on the show a
Mhm.
lot about, people that get hung up with perfection and, they want
Yeah.
everything to be perfect before they launch it. And, we don't
Hmm.
want to do that unless it's perfect, but, it's never perfect. And
Yeah.
then in this frame that you're talking about,
Hmm.
we can never expect things to be totally certain. I mean, it's the world we live in. It's always uncertain. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going
Yeah.
to, be the next thing. And so, embracing change
Hmm.
and uncertainty, I would think would be something that we need to do.
It's a critical skill set. It sounds much easier to do in theory than it is in practice because every single playbook, governance, framework, system that we've learned as we've kind of grown organizations is optimizing for certainty and stability, not uncertainty. And so that's part of the reason it's not just a reframing of our mindset. We actually have to reframe some of the ways that we approach these different aspects. Is the most common response to uncertainty is paralysis where we say, let's just wait, right? Let's just wait till after the summer. Let's just wait till after the tariff decision. Let's just wait till after the war. And we always give ourselves these artificial deadlines of when we'll have this supposed certainty and we can make a great decision. But part of leading through uncertainty is acknowledging that we can't always make great predictions. So the skills that I need to build with my team is how do I make great decisions, even though I can't make great predictions? In shifting that time you're spending on trying to predict, with modeling and scenario planning, which there's a bit of it that's helpful, but moving some of that capability build to decision making, that's what really becomes the differentiator.
Yeah, yeah. In your book, you talk about the first you got to stabilize the company, and
Yeah.
then the next is to reset strategy and,
Mhm.
and build capabilities, and then thrive. And you refer to it as the survive, reset, thrive loop.
Mhm.
So just kind of tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
what that means and what you're trying to grasp with that concept.
No, thanks, Steve. It's going to sound theoretical, but we'll make it practical. Growth is a loop, not a line, right? We really need to embrace this loop thinking or this loop mentality versus linear checklists. And there's something that I noticed, kind of post COVID and back in 2020, post some of the wars that have happened over the past couple of years, post Brexit in the UK in 2016, is that when there's a system shock, we instantly see uncertainty or the unknown as bad. So we go into this recession playbook. And then we assume, okay, well, when the shock has abated, we can go back into this thrive mode. And that's not really the reality. And frankly, it's kind of lazy to let the market tell us when it's a good time to lead our company. And the second thing I really noticed was that we always spoke about don't just survive, thrive. Or you can't just survive chaos, you've got to thrive. And it misses the fundamental point that thriving doesn't come from merely surviving. Those organizations who consistently and successfully thrive are those willing to do the reset. Of those three modes of the loop of survive, reset, and thrive, the reset is the power move. The reset is where you say, hey, based on the change situation, I am now going to change something about how my company is structured or run or my strategy going forward. And I'd like to simplify it to a growth mandate is a change mandate. If you want growth in this environment, you need to also be willing to change some of the ways that you approach the company. And very, very few organizations are willing to do that. It's very easy to stand up at the beginning of the year and say, hey, this uncertainty is going to be great for us, but then want to use all of your same systems, processes, tools, meeting structure. So a growth mandate is a change mandate. And that's why the reset is such a powerful moment.
I think that's a really great point because,
Mhm.
you wouldn't think growth is, an uncertainty, type of thing, but
Yeah.
I think most companies do have, they do a great job in strategy, they do a great job in planning, but very few really have that
Mhm.
uncertainty or
Yeah.
change tied into it. It's kind of like, there might be a few contingency plans, but
Mhm.
again, I think most companies are always, well, not always, usually surprised when something happens and now we have
Yes.
to rethink it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, we adjust for change or as a risk, right? And if you look at most strategies, Steve, they almost always have a risk register or something like that, which is the appendix one that says, hey, here's all of the things that could go wrong. And
Yeah.
this really takes away from our growth mindset. Whereas after the reset, I like to have an opportunity index where I say, hey, here's all of the other growth opportunities out there in the market. We deprioritized them, but hey, they're here and we'll come back to them if we need to. And this whole mindset of seeing the world as a series of growth opportunities. And our job is merely kind of deciding which one of those to take. But I really want to make sure we double down on the point. Uncertainty is a great time to grow. It's not easy, right? But it's a great time to grow. Now, one of the reasons it's a great time to grow is the majority of the market is stuck in paralysis or delusion. And delusion is what I call when we have a plan, we want to stick to the plan. And you'll see this a lot across different organizations. They'll say, well, I already communicated the plan to my board, or we've already rolled out the strategy, so we must stick to the plan. And not too long ago, I saw on a board deck, we will remain disciplined to the plan no matter what. And the team put it in as this moment of pride, like saying, hey, we're so great. We're going to stick to this no matter what. And that was a huge red flag for me. It's like, I don't want you to stick to a plan no matter what. I want you to be open to learning. So if you as a leader can avoid delusion or paralysis, you're already one step ahead. But the biggest reason uncertainty is a great time to grow is it's a great time to learn. Is that when there's uncertainty in the environment, as we're certainly seeing now in 2026, what also gets high is honesty. Is consumers are much more clear about what they value. Your customers, if you're B2B, are much more clear about what they need from a partner and what they don't. Across the ecosystem, from customers, consumers, partners, and vendors, they all are much more honest. This is what I need and this is what I don't. Most companies stop learning in uncertainty because they're so focused on hitting the micro numbers. And the organizations that lean in and say, I'm going to learn faster than everybody else, that's the ultimate differentiator. Organizations that learn faster are organizations that grow faster.
It's interesting you use the word honesty in
Yeah.
2026 because we're sitting here with, oh my gosh, there's so much, it depends
Yeah.
on who you listen to or who you read or who you
Yes.
talk to. It feels like we have to find our own way as what is
Yeah.
truth and what is honest.
Hmm.
And so, understanding that and getting
Hmm.
that message out to your clients and
Yes.
consumers,
And I'll
I
go
think,
back to, are you willing to do the work? Look,
yeah.
it is really easy to cut your entire research budget and go to Gen AI and build some Gen AI personas and test all of your new products or solutions on those. And you'll get some learnings and some insights, right? But those still aren't real people, right? You take
Mhm.
those learnings and those insights, and then you go out to the real world and talk to real customers and real consumers who are going to be buying, consuming your solutions and see what they want. Gen AI solves a lot of things, but it doesn't solve that final, intimately, deeply knowing your customer. Because only when I do that can I really deploy all of these AI tools. So, yes, it is becoming easier than ever to not do the hard work of strategy, which means the rewards to those who are willing to do it are higher than ever.
Well, that just reminds me, you talk about Gen AI. It's like it's
Yeah.
so easy to say whether it's a politician or whatever.
Hmm.
They come out and they say something. It's so easy to
Yeah.
check that in Gen AI. But
Hmm.
even if it comes out and says this is all false, there's still people that don't believe it.
Yes. Yeah.
They believe what they want to believe and with the
Hmm.
information they have. So I do think there's that human element that is always there, and it's just kind of you scratch your head sometimes thinking, well, how can you believe that or say that
Yeah.
when here's a
Yeah.
fact check,
It
but
is. Yes. Yeah.
it's crazy. Yeah, and in the book, you already referenced this a little
Hmm.
bit, but the fundamentals of the survive,
Yeah.
reset, and thrive is number one, uncertainty does not always have bad consequences that we just
Hmm.
already talked about. And number two, strategy is still the same. It's the art of creating value.
Yeah.
And then your third point there is no one can predict the future that we just talked
Hmm.
about. So that
Yeah.
it's just interesting that you do have to kind of grasp these fundamentals if you're going to go forward in this
Yeah.
uncertain world.
And I think fundamentals are really important because one kind of big coaching I give to leaders is that, your teams are obsessed with what's changing and for a good reason, right? Because as we talked about, they're getting a constant news cycle where there's much more noise than there is nuance. They're hearing all of these things. And yes, our job is to embrace change and lead change, but it's also to anchor on what hasn't changed. And there are some really key fundamentals of growing an organization which are the same. And we are still tasked with the goal of creating value. And whether you're a publicly traded company or a private or not for profit, value creation is still there. They're just slightly different definitions. And so I always like to go back and say, yes, when I'm talking or teaching about an AI course, I'm chasing a moving target. This thing is moving and evolving on a weekly basis. And strategy, though, has remained the same. It's the same definition it's been since the 1960s or 70s. Strategy is creating value. Value creation is driving the biggest gap possible between our customers' willingness to pay for our products, services, and solutions and our total cost of delivering that value. Now, AI and Gen AI enable and support and accelerate value creation, but it doesn't change what value creation is. So I think let's sum back up. The key thing we can do as leaders as well is end meetings with, and what hasn't changed? Like, what are some constants or some fundamentals that remain? That anchor is really powerful for rallying the team.
Is your advice and input into the business
Yeah.
world or whatever all through academia and now your book, or do you also do consulting on the side with
So
businesses?
everything in the book is tried and true in the real world. I don't put anything in the book or teach anything in the classroom that I haven't used with dozens, if not hundreds of companies. So most of my time is spent working directly with teams, putting a lot of these things into place. Then once it's vetted and it's worked, then I'll use it something in the classroom. So no, we're really trying to, some theories work, but you need to take the theoretical principle and turn it into practically what's possible.
And in the book, the chapters are all written in the order of execution as well,
Yes,
so
the
it's like,
order that I want you to go in them. Yes. Now, this was what I wanted to do, which was clearly like vetoed by the publisher, is one of the things that I had when the book was still an article is entrepreneurs would say, "Oh, this is great. Can you just send me the Thrive chapter? Because that's the only part that I care about." You know these entrepreneurs, right, Steve? So I
yeah.
had this, what I thought was a very creative idea where I said, well, we should just publish the book with the Survive and the Reset chapters. And then you could write in and say that you'd done the work and now you could get your Thrive chapter. Now they turned that idea down, but I still like the principle. If you got to do the hard work of the Survive and the Reset before you have the right to thrive.
Well, that's the classic. You
Yeah.
got to prepare and you got to practice before you
Exactly.
go forward.
Exactly. Yes.
So how does a company define its competitive advantage?
Yeah.
It's obviously you kind of have to know that to
Hmm.
take your growth strategy in the right direction. So how do you know, how do you define it?
No, you say obviously, Steve, and it's probably obvious to you, like working with the organizations that you do. Competitive advantage is something that a lot of organizations have got relatively lazy about over the past couple of years. Is that we tend to rely on the same things that everyone else has. We talk about our heritage or our legacy or our brand or our great people, and all of these are fine things, but they're not competitive advantage, right? And if you really go back to the what are the principles of having competitive advantage, what I call right to win, because I like it to be more powerful, is the only ways to win is to have things that others don't, right? Or you can do things that others can't, or you can build moats around your advantage. And then the list becomes quite short to really have something as an organization others don't, or to really be able to do things that others cannot, or to be able to break these barriers or moats around your advantage. And that's hard enough to define the short list. What's even harder is competitive advantage is forward looking. What is my right to win going to be in the next 3 to 5 years? It's much more tempting to write down what it used to be and ignore some critical changes going around us. AI or Gen AI or a Gen Z consumer, a changing industry, blurred lines. Most industries are going through pretty seismic shifts right now. And the key question is how are you going to grow in that world with the right to win that matters in that changing world?
And I've always thought of it too that, what if you have an idea or a product and it's really good, it's going to get copied, that
Yeah,
someone else is going to do it and try and do it better. And so you only have a short time to do that. But,
such a
a
short
competitive
time. Yeah.
advantage may be your culture or how you treat
Mhm.
customers and how you see the world.
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to be something that's tangible. It could be something that you are,
Mhm.
if that makes
It
sense.
could be a capability, something that you do. And this is the burden that leaders have to play. If your organization is one of these market leaders, what is your competitive advantage becomes the bar for the industry, what everyone else tries to copy. And your job is to continually be resetting the bar in every cycle. So every 2 to 4 years, you're building the next competitive advantage. What happens instead is that companies have a competitive advantage. They have stuff others don't, or they can do stuff others can't, but it gets copied. And instead of kind of resetting the bar for the next cycle, they end up at parity or table stakes with all of those around you. I It's weird, but it's actually sometimes easier to think about right to win as a challenger because you know what the bar is, right? You can see all the ways that the market leaders are competing. You decide to match those who competes in a different way. As the legacy player, you've got to be resetting the bar even before the pressure is directly on you.
all we can talk about, it seems like these days, is AI, and
Yes.
everyone's talking about AI. So, in your opinion, and you're seeing a lot of
Hmm.
different companies and doing a lot of research with a lot of different companies, have companies embraced it, or do you think they're resisting it? Are they doing it in the right way? What's your general feel about how most people are looking at AI? Are they just, because I've seen both. I've seen some say, you know what, we're not going to get that. It's too confusing. We don't do that. Then there's others that embrace it 100%, and I'm sure there's variations of
Hmm.
both sides of that.
Yeah, it's a huge it depends answer. At the beginning, there was certainly a doubting. Is organizations not wanting to jump onto another technology, especially with Gen AI, that would be a passing fad? Is this the next blockchain? Is this the next VR? Is this just one more thing that you're telling me is going to change everything? I'm going to invest a lot and it's not going to be. So I'd say the doubting moved to dabbling, right? Where, yes, we invested in some licenses, we went to some training sessions, we were playing around with it, but really scratching the surface. We're summarizing meeting notes, we're making agendas, we're sending follow-ups, which led, of course, into this AI slop where we're actually, your efficiency is leading to my lack of productivity. This is going to take me twice as long to weed through all this AI nonsense that you sent me to kind of read. Now we're seeing get a lot more deliberate, like actually integrating it into your strategy and value creation. But that's still not the majority of the companies. So, around kind of 30-40% of occupations are using it for around 20 to 30% of their tasks. So there's adoption, but not maybe near the widespread we would think at work. There's much more adoption in personal lives than there is in the work world right now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You also in the book talk about how leaders should be able to create a picture, and of what it's going to look like, and helping
Mhm.
people kind of see that finish line, and being able to do that, and you can do that through stories and
Mhm.
storytelling and doing that. So it's very important because
Yeah.
again, if it's that abstract and if people are not sure about it, they don't know what it looks like.
Yeah, finish lines really matter. And even when we're facing uncertainty, the finish line matters because the weird paradox of uncertainty is think about it, Steve, the more uncertainty we're facing, the more your team begs you for clarity, right? The more kind of the world is changing around and the more they look to their leadership team and say, okay, like what's going on? Tell me what to do. And that's exactly when we can't provide them that level of clarity. So these finish lines still matter. Like, what is the story of what are we trying to achieve? Now, and this should be not just a number, but actually a compelling finish line of in 2 to 3 years' time, this is what we should look like as an organization. But we can decide. We can have destinations or directions. Is sometimes we can set very clear destinations. We can say, by the end of 2028, we're going to have this much revenue, this much margin, we're going to be present in these markets, and that's great. But often, if we're really facing extreme uncertainty or our business model is shifting or we're facing a lot of disruptive innovation, we can't give those precise destinations. And I don't want you to, right? Because you might take the organization straight for the wrong place. Instead, we can set a direction, which kind of liken it to holding a compass and having a compass heading. It's like, I don't know what exit I'm taking on the highway, but I know that I'm going northwest. I can give my team clarity of the direction and get tighter and tighter as we progress. And so, one of our key jobs as leaders is not just to set the finish line, but it's to know in this current environment, do I need a destination or do I need a direction?
I think you said that well because, you could look at it as I'm going to
Mhm.
set the finish line. I have to paint the picture exactly it's going to be. Yet,
Yeah.
as a good leader who's vulnerable, it's good sometimes to say, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's going to happen, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
So there's got to be somewhere in between that what people feel
Yes.
like you're painting the picture of what
Hmm.
could be, but you're not, so solid in the
Hmm.
idea that you could miss it, and then the company's just off the wrong track.
Yeah, and this goes back to the perfection point you realized earlier. Like, I can communicate the progress we need to make without getting very precise about what that endpoint is actually going to look like. And that's part of my job, right, as a leader, is to show that direction, even when that very precise destination is not possible.
So explain to us, you talk in the book too about this BLAST framework,
Yes.
BLAST.
Hmm.
So, I'm sure that we could spend the whole time on that, but just kind of
Hmm.
summarize what that means.
So, what I was trying to do, Steve, was say one of the top questions I get outside of the world of AI is, what really sets high growth, high performing companies apart? Like, because we know the classic stuff is just like, let's say nonsense, right? Like, great team, great people, like, great strategy. It's like, we know all of that. That's not really differentiating. Like, what are those few elements that if a company has these, they're going to consistently and successfully outperform others? And that's where I created BLAST. So, BLAST stands for beliefs, learning, agility, shared context, and trust. And it's we make decisions based on beliefs, not waiting for facts. We learn faster than others, learn faster, grow faster. We have agility, so make good decisions quickly, a clear shared context of what matters, and then trust. And trust is not a throwaway at the end, like liking each other and getting along. Trust means something very specific and high growth. Trust means we have reliability across a network of performance commitments. So if you've got a commitment to me, I know it's going to get done. If I've got a commitment to you, you know it's going to get done. And that sounds simple, but I've done like a global study on this over 12,000 organizations. Trust is actually really low in
Yeah,
organizations.
it
The
is. Yeah.
majority of time, if we've got a commitment coming in from horizontally, so a colleague in another unit, we have very low confidence it's going to get done. And when we lack trust, we do all of these dysfunctional things. We just do stuff ourselves, or we ask someone else to do it, or we escalate issues, or we hold follow up meetings, or follow up calls, or review meetings. And all of these things we do because trust is low not only eat up a ton of time, they erode our growth mindset. And so, why there's so few companies who consistently and successfully outperform others is they combine this acting on the beliefs, the learning velocity, the agility, the clear context of what matters, but then they have high trust because reliability gives you adaptability. When you can rely on commitments that are coming into you, your mind share, I think, is freed to focus on that, what creates value, not all of the minutia of following up. So reliability gives you adaptability, and that's what holds all of those blast elements together.
So let's say that I'm a CEO
Hmm.
that realizes I've got a real
Yeah,
trust issue
yeah,
in my team or in my company. And I
hmm,
come to you and say, we don't trust each other. We
yeah,
got to do something. I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, what do you do then?
yeah,
What things do you do
yeah.
to bring back that trust?
What's funny is that this happens a lot in organizations with a culture of teamwork or friendliness or getting along. And the notion is why this happens is that I culturally can't say no. So if you ask my team to do something, we have a culture of we can always get it done and or kind of coordination, so I have to say yes. And then inevitably if everyone says yes to everything, we are just simply cannot get everything done and then some critical things fall off. And it's going to sound silly. And if you've got young children, it's going to sound like we're training them. But you actually help your organization make better commitments. So, how do I make a good commitment? It has five characteristics, and it starts with the vowels of the English language. It's active, explicit, intent based, open, and understood. So think active. You didn't just send me WhatsApp, Steve. You said, "Hey, Rebecca, like I need to get the numbers to a partner by Friday. Can you help me out with this?" We have an active discussion, right? It's explicit. So it's very clear. It's not, "Hey, can you do this?" It's, "Hey, I need help with these three numbers," right? It's very clear. Then it's intent based. You link it back to what we're trying to achieve as a company. This, Steve, is why most commitments are so poor, is I have no sense of prioritizing them. Then it's open. We make the commitment in the meeting, not the side meeting or the meeting after the meeting. Then it's understood, as in you don't have the right to rely on my commitment unless you've acknowledged that I understand it. So active, explicit, intent based, open, and understood. Now, the first thing a leader will say is, "There's no way I have time for this. Like, you don't realize how busy I am." It's like, well, yeah, you're busy because the whole organization is running around chasing stuff. So you've
Yeah.
got to take this purposeful pause and say, we are going to be a company with high reliability, which means there's going to be less commitments in the system while we build this capability. But we're going to build this capability up back again. So you've got to take this purposeful pause. All of this stuff, you got to slow down to speed up. Like we always had this obsession with speed, but this
Mm.
is a muscle. Growth is a muscle. It is not something your organization will just have. You have to commit to building the muscle just as much as you commit to the growth you want on the market.
I think it's a great, you said this earlier, but I just
Yeah.
want to come back to it because I
Yeah.
think it's a great explanation of, there's uncertainty and then there's
Hmm.
chaos.
Yeah.
And, chaos is just, talk about people getting burned out and
Hmm.
frustrated and giving up and whatever. That's
Yeah.
chaos,
Yes.
So, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Hmm.
I love in the book too where you do use real life stories, and I'm somebody who
Yeah.
learns by stories, and I
Yes.
love stories. So, one story in the book was you gave an example of a company that you were presenting the reset strategy,
Hmm.
And the CEO said, "Well, what do you think?" And I think you said, "Well, probably half of them got it, and then only a
Yeah.
third of them will actually do something about it." And his look to you is like, "Oh, really?" But that's kind
Yeah.
of it's daunting when you look at the numbers,
Yeah.
but you can see what happens even
Mhm.
if it's presented well and people believe it. It's
Totally.
still a long
Yes.
way to get there.
I distinctly remember this conversation, and I mean, it's not the only one that I've had. Big annual kickoff, as so many companies do. The top 100 or 200 people in the room spend a lot of time crafting the message, practice the message, give the message, and then the CEO goes, "Well, how did it go?" And you say, "Great," but half again, as you said, half probably got it, and of those, a third are going to do something with it. And crestfallen, he just says, "So a six," and the answer is, if we're lucky, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Because communicating a strategy is the hardest part about building shared context. The S in the blast, Steve, is that you're never done. Like, look, and I'm guilty of this myself, right? I love my to-do list. I love checking things off the to-do list, and I like to call things done, right? We like that. Like, they're great. That's a space for one more thing to go on it. Building shared context is always on your list. There will never be a day as a leader you do not have that on your to-do list. And that can be frustrating because we just want stuff done. But if you commit to this will always be on my list, there will never be a day where I can say context is built. And as soon as you own that, you're one step farther in. And
Mhm.
one of my other favorite stories, who I didn't work with personally, it was before my time, but when Lou Gerstner turned IBM around, and in his closing press conference, when he was like putting the book out, which is a fabulous book, Why Elephants Can't Dance, one of the reporters asked him this question. They said, "What was the hardest part of turning IBM around?" And we expect him to say something like closing some of the units or firing some critical people. Like he made a lot of tough choices during that turnaround. And his response, Steve, Lou Gerstner's response was saying the same thing every day in every meeting for 7 years. He
Yeah.
went
Yeah.
into every single meeting and opened the meeting by saying, IBM does not sell mainframes. IBM sells integrated solutions to the world's largest companies. And he said that every day, every meeting for 7 years. And that's what it takes to start building
No.
context across an organization.
Yeah, no question. It's a great
Yeah.
story, and I think
Yeah.
leaders, myself, and you probably as well, have experienced that. Where if you
Yeah.
want somebody to get a concept or to
Hmm.
get a movement, whatever it is, you
Hmm.
do. You have to say it, and I can remember doing that myself, and
Yeah.
at first, your team starts making fun of you. Oh, here he goes again. Here he says the same thing
Exactly.
again.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it works when
Hmm.
they're presenting something and then they use the phrase.
Yes.
So it's like,
Yes.
okay, great. It's sunken in. They finally got it, but it does. It
Hmm.
takes repetition. It takes
Yeah.
them hearing it many, many, many times. And
This is good. It's going to
yeah,
sound silly, Steve, but this is what I say now to leaders. And tell me if you've ever had this experience with a message. I say, if you've communicated the same message so many times, the thought of saying it one more time makes you actually a little like nauseous, like you're going to throw up in your
yeah,
mouth because you're so tired
yeah,
of it. The organization might just about get it. Like that
yeah.
is the bar, right? And we just never want to
Right.
push that close to the bar. Yeah.
And to understand that, because
Yeah.
you've heard and I've heard many times, a
Yeah.
lot of times people say, "Well, I've told them that. They know that. I
Yeah.
don't,
Everyone
and
gets
it's
it.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
or why don't they get it? I've told them that a million
Hmm.
times.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. Yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, you talk in the book too about transition matters, making
Hmm.
the moves between the modes that
Hmm.
really make a difference too. And so that's important in the process as well.
Yes. Absolutely. It's easier to succeed within them. And what's funny is people think, oh, well, moving out of survive, everyone's going to be so anxious to get out of survive mode, they rush it. What I found is actually the opposite, is that if your organization is really in survive mode, where you need to stabilize after a shock, whether it's an external shock or an internal shock, the fear of not doing that well, the fear of letting the company go under your watch is so high, you will keep yourself stuck in survive mode, just going through the same cycle of cash flow and low cost and kind of, clear customer communication and not investing and not innovating and not growing. And you need to move yourself out, right, and get into the reset and start thinking about what that next growth will look like.
Like in the book, you say things that are everyday things, but yet
Mhm.
you say them in a little different way, which I find myself then saying,
Mhm.
"Oh." you just think of it in a little different way. Case in point, you talk about that leadership, we should stop planning and start preparing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell us, what is the difference and why do you put it that way?
I'm not anti-planning, right? We still need planning in parts of the organization. And when efficiency and detail matters, that's a great place for planning. If I can build a linear model to tell me what happens next, great planning. But words matter. And I've stopped using the word plan next to strategy. I don't like to call them strategic plans anymore because there is something about the word plan that frames our brain. Everything in this must get done. And that's not strategies. Strategies are living and breathing documents that change and adapt. So I need to go into preparation mode. And preparation mode thinks I'm not being reactive. I'm not waiting for the market to punch me to react. I'm building this robust organization that can continue to grow through everything. And I say continue to grow, not handle. Like it's easier to build a resilient organization. I can keep punching you and you don't die. That's not what I'm talking about. Robustness is no, I'm gonna see this volatility. I'm gonna chart a growth pathway through it because I've built these muscles. I'm making decisions based on beliefs. I'm not waiting for established facts. I'm okay to set directions versus destinations. And you know what? Some of the variables I need are going to emerge as I go. I can't always set perfect KPIs at the beginning of a strategy cycle. Look, my background's economics. Like, I love numbers in a spreadsheet more than anyone, right? But I've had to come to embrace that I can't always build you a perfect scorecard or KPIs at the beginning, and that's okay. I need to start executing and start learning. Then I'll know what variables I should actually be measuring.
Yeah, I think the word plan is interesting because it
Yeah.
does force us into what I think a lot of things happening right now are trying to force us into, which is black and white thinking.
Yes.
And I've had a little mantra that I actually gave a speech on it once
Mhm.
on a national stage, and the title was "I Believe in the Gray."
Yeah.
And it's just, it depends. You can't just, you have to be willing to change and you have to
Mhm.
be willing to do it, okay, that didn't work, so maybe we should do this. But a plan kind of indicates that, this is the way it's done, this is the way you
Mhm.
have to do it, and you do it from A to Z, and if you don't, then you failed.
Absolutely. And I believe it was Eisenhower, but you'll probably know better than me the quote that's often paraphrased that plans are useless, but planning is everything, right? Is we
Yeah.
need to go through these steps and build this preparation, but understand the plan is the best guess at the time of what will work. But like many guesses, a lot of it's going to be right and a lot of it's going to be wrong. And I am okay with that. I'm going to change and adapt it as I go.
In the book, you also talk
Mhm.
about a must-win battle.
Yeah.
So what's a must-win battle?
So, the must-win battle, the term actually originated from the business school IMD. I use it in a slightly different way. The reason I started using the term was I was just tired of the nonsense inside organizations of how many words we used for most important thing. If you're a company of 10, let alone 10,000, you have priorities, goals, rocks, KPRs, OKRs, targets, tasks, aims. Like I could keep going, right? Like the amount of language we have which translates to most important thing, is exhausting, right? So, how am I supposed to know what really matters the most for growth? So, I like the term must wins or must win battles because it rises above all that and says, these are the things that absolutely must happen. I like in your face language to show these are the couple of things that we need to do. They are midterm, so it's not 1 year, but not forever, kind of 2 to 4 years. They cut across the organization, they're not a functional priority. They are focused on the market, like, the key growth that we need to have. And they engage the team in pushing towards that finish line, whether it's a direction or a destination. And the list needs to be relatively short. Now, I don't believe in the you can only have one thing or only two things. These artificial numbers, they don't work in the real world. Sometimes you need four, sometimes you need five, sometimes it's two. But I do know the less you fight, the more you win. And if you've
Mhm.
got 8 must-win battles, you're probably going to lose some of them.
Yeah, interesting. So we have this word thrive, like
Yes.
you need to thrive. And so I
Mhm.
think we all understand what that means, but give us a real life example of a company that you think is thriving. What is it? What are they doing that you could say they are thriving?
So, a Thrive organization is consistently setting assumptions, testing assumptions, acting on their beliefs, and growing above the market. Now, there's always going to be blips, right? But if we look at Airbnb post-COVID, they were supposed to die. They became a Thrive organization. WD-40 company has never done layoffs in their entire history, yet their number one input is petroleum, right? So how can a company with their number one input being a commodity with volatile prices never kind of have to do this aspect of layoffs? I speak about companies like Gorilla Glue in the book. There's a great park in the book that I mentioned that really use some of these opportunities to reset themselves and thrive. So thrive is not a given, like it must be earned, right? But if you put some of these blast principles into place, you can become one of these thrive organizations.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting.
Mhm.
Also talk about when you're trying to get to thrive, let's say, what are
Mhm.
some of the biggest roadblocks that leaders face,
Yeah.
doing the reset and getting
Mhm.
to the thrive stage.
You want to know the truth, Steve? The
Yeah.
biggest roadblock leaders face is themselves,
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure you're going to
Yes.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, here's another argument I had with the publisher. I wanted to call chapter 11 Why You Won't Do This. As in, like, the first 10 chapters were giving you the step-by-step playbook, what I know works, right? If you put it into place, because I've seen it, dozens and hundreds of times. But I've also seen it not work, and it's almost always due to the leadership team at the time. And I had to change into something more nice management speak, as always happens in these processes. I think it's called like traps to avoid or something like that. But I want you to know the original title was Why You Won't Do This. And some of it's well meaning, right? A big reason that this doesn't happen is what I call false air cover, where you say, look, this is just so tough. The uncertainty is so much. Like, I just got to let the team focus on the business. Like, I'm going to take care of this. And we're falsely protecting the team from building the strategic capability. Another one is simply boredom, right? Is that thrive is exciting, but if you're a leader who likes things constantly changing, you get bored in thrive mode, right? Because it's working. Like you've built something that's working, the team is executing. A lot of leaders love the adrenaline of the survive phase, the
Yeah.
constant huddles and that push of the crisis. And a lot of leaders love the intellectual stimulation of the reset phase. The what is our right to win? What are our beliefs? And then you get to thrive. And you're like, well, now what, right? And the real now what is what you're supposed to be doing is building for the next cycle and the next cycle, but this can hold you back a bit. And then there's the impatience, the impatience with the results. And there is a capability and a muscle. You got a dual journey. I'm building the growth in the market, but I'm also building the muscle of the company to always be able to deliver this growth. And there needs to be a bit of patience, but not too much, right? But the
Yeah.
appropriate amount of patience. And again, I'll go back to the one of the first things I said. A growth mandate is a change mandate. You can put all the pieces in place, but if you're not willing to change the infrastructure in which you operate, a lot of this won't work.
It's so interesting too, different personalities. Like a very dear friend, and we were both
Yeah.
CEOs at the same time, and
Mhm.
sitting around talking one time, and he said, I kind of at my best, and I kind of love it when there's
Mhm.
a train wreck. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I hate train wrecks.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like we
Yeah.
were both in
Yeah.
a similar position, but approached it
Mhm.
in a very different way, just based on personality. And I do think
Yeah.
that there are people that, feel like they aren't providing enough value or doing enough
Mhm.
unless they're just really doing something like
Absolutely.
digging a ditch. And there's other people that feel like, now that things are thriving and doing well,
Mhm.
uh, that's where I'm best. Now I can go around
Exactly.
praise everybody and pat them on the back and tell them how great they are and so on. So
Mhm.
I think it's different personalities look at it different ways too.
It is. And then, if you're sitting on a board, like, do we have the right person in the role at this time? Like, if you're a Survive CEO, you should do that, right? Because that is a skill
Mhm.
set. And then you should have the intellectual fortitude to say, I've gotten you through Survive. I've helped you with the reset, and I'm going to go now help another company through the Survive phase because
Mhm.
the run rate execution is something that belongs to someone else. Now, I think most leaders can adapt, but it's acknowledging that I am now need to kind of think I need to pull in a different part of my leadership muscles in these different modes.
So as I said earlier, the book is
Yeah.
very comprehensive and
Yeah.
very well done. There's so much information there. So I'm
Mhm.
just curious, you come up with
Mhm.
this title and kind of this theory or this strategy, and then you write this very comprehensive book. When you're done with the book, Are you like, oh man, thank God I'm done with the book and whatever? Or are you like, oh, I'm already got the next book in mind? How do you look at it?
Well, there's a bit of both. So the book was, I mean, all books are challenging to write, and anyone who says that writing a book was fun and easy, like, is lying, right?
Yeah.
It's just not. Um, the book was in some ways, though, very approachable because I do this every day, right? I'm having these conversations every day. I'm hopefully healthily, but obsessed with these topics. So in that part, I actually really, really enjoyed the process of writing the book. I didn't like the loneliness, because a lot of writing a book is, as you know, sitting by yourself in a room and just like getting it done, which I kind of adapted to, but that took some time. Um, the next book is called Learn Faster, Grow Faster. And it kind of takes what we talk about in chapter 10, the blast chapter, and it kind of pulls that out. So, what's going to happen next? If you want to be one of these Thrive companies, how do you build this constant learning velocity to stay there? However, there's so much going on in the external world right now with Survive, Reset, Thrive, especially as it goes into new languages and formats, that I'm going to wait a little bit longer before the second book because there's just so many more conversations to explore within Survive, Reset, Thrive. But the next one is ready and teed up, and we'll start writing as soon as our external volatility gives me enough of a break to get focused on it. Yeah,
Wow. And getting back to AI, how do you think
yeah,
AI is going to change the
yeah.
author of book world? Is it,
You
do
know,
you,
yeah.
yeah,
I don't
because
know
I
how it's
could,
been for your experience. All of my colleagues are handling it differently, from avoiding it like the plague to using it for everything. Um, I, play with it and experiment with it because you can't teach something and not kind of use it. I like it when I'm writing my monthly newsletter. I like using different Gen AI tools to pull reports for me, right, to kind of help me do those aspects. But I think it's because of my background as an economist. I don't like AI summaries of very detailed economic papers, like to go and make sure and kind of verify. So it's great as a thought partner. It's great for helping me pull things together. And it's great for kind of rewriting something. Hey, I've used the same word 4 times and I know that kind of helped me out. I've never been one who struggles with kind of the outlines or the structure, so I haven't used it for that yet, but I'm sure I'll have to use it much more in the next one than I did the first one. For an industry, it's really troubling because it's putting a lot of crap out there in the world. If anyone can write a book, then anyone can write a really bad book, right? And it actually takes a lot to write a good book. And you can pull from lots of stuff, as the Gen AI tools can do, but it doesn't yet substitute for the key insights. And this is what I tell folks who are using it for strategy. Yeah, it's great to help you brainstorm. If you're struggling, use it to brainstorm, use it to summarize, but it's not going to get you to all of the insights. There's still a human element of the insights that's super critical to the process.
yeah, it's interesting. I interviewed a person
Yeah.
who helps business leaders publish books.
Hmm.
And what he said kind of alarmed me a little bit. He said, well, the second you write a book and you're done, then you're the expert. And so that's
Yeah.
why it's good to do it. So
Hmm.
even if it's a crap book, just because you
Yeah.
have a book with your name on it and whatever, now you're the
Mhm.
expert on that topic, even though
Yeah.
maybe what's in the book isn't necessarily
Yeah.
expert
Yeah.
material.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you're right. I think there is a lot of crap out there.
Mhm.
On the other hand, it's just so good to hear things in different ways, even
Mhm.
though, maybe you've heard it before in a different way, but sometimes things said differently resonate
Yes.
in a different way. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So in anticipation of our
Yeah.
discussion today, what haven't I asked you or what haven't we covered that you want to be sure and get in the program?
No, I think you've covered it all, Steve. We've really covered quite a lot here. I think I want to go back to the beginning that we are facing a heightened level of uncertainty and volatility by any empirical measure, right? And we have, different indices. And it is very tempting to go into paralysis or delusion right now. Either it's changing too much, let's just stick to the plan, or let's just wait till we know more. And I need leaders to avoid both of those. I need them to lean in and say, this is going to be great for me because I'm going to learn faster than everybody else. I'm going to take this changing environment to learn faster, and that will allow me to grow faster. But a growth mandate is a change mandate, right? If you want to get these outsized growth, you have to be willing to do outsized levels of change. And a lot of folks are not willing to do that.
At this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the
Yeah.
same common question, and that
Okay.
question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could
Mm.
leave us with today?
I said the same things a couple times, so I'm going to repeat for the 100th time purposely. A growth mandate is a change mandate. But I will say that traditional leadership often trained us that we needed to have the answers. And I'm sure many other guests have told you this before, but the real role of leaders right now is to ask the right questions, right? What
Yeah.
are the questions we need to be asking in the market? And remove the burden that you need an answer for all of this. None of us do. Your job is the most insightful, timely questions and helping your team get to them. And that is a much, hopefully, more exciting leadership mandate to take on.
That is very well said. And I think, in my opinion, that a lot of, especially newer CEOs or younger CEOs,
Mhm.
make that mistake where, okay, now I'm in this position. Now I need to
Yeah,
know all the answers. And it's
exactly.
just a
Yeah.
disaster because you know darn well that you don't know
Mhm.
all the answers. And it's your
Yeah.
job is to help collectively come up with the answer, not for you to
Mhm.
give the answer. So,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, for sure. So, what's your week look like? I mean, are you in Miami, San Francisco, London? What?
Yeah, so I'm South Florida this week. I'll be in Europe next week. It's a pretty busy period of the world, but I'm going to enjoy a little bit of Florida sunshine before I fly back to Europe this weekend. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, this has been a real pleasure. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed talking with you, and I've learned a lot. As I said, the book is well done and very comprehensive. So, for those that are interested, pick it up. It's good, and you get a lot of information. So, thanks for being on the show. It's great to have you, and hopefully, maybe I'll see you down the road one of these days.
Hope so, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
Take care. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orange, the word, .coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.